If you think growing older means accepting pain, brain fog, weakness, and a shrinking life, I need you to stop right there, because that belief may be one of the most dangerous lies ever handed to people after 60. What I am about to share is not a fantasy, not empty motivation, and not another recycled speech about aging gracefully. It is a hard look at the quiet routines that steal strength, memory, confidence, and independence from millions of older adults while they barely notice it happening. And the most unsettling part is this: some of these routines feel normal, responsible, even healthy. For more than 2 decades, Dr. Harrison Cole spent his days with older patients who believed they were simply experiencing age. They said the same things again and again. I am slowing down. I get tired so easily. My joints feel older every morning. My memory is slipping. I do not feel like myself anymore. But when he listened carefully, a pattern emerged. In many cases, these people were not collapsing because time had suddenly turned against them. They were being worn down by habits so common, so culturally accepted, and so rarely questioned that nobody had warned them about the cost. That is what makes this conversation urgent. It is not about chasing youth, it is about protecting function. The ability to think clearly, get out of a chair, recover from illness, walk without fear, sleep without chemical fog, and wake up with a sense that your life still belongs to you. Research tracking thousands of older adults over many years has pointed toward the same unnerving truth. A small number of daily behaviors can accelerate decline far more than people realize, while a few strategic changes can produce dramatic improvements even late in life. And that is the part most people never hear. Improvement does not expire at 70, it does not disappear at 75, it does not close its doors at 80. Some of the most meaningful reversals in energy, balance, inflammation, and mental clarity begin after people assume the window has already closed. That assumption is lethal. Once someone believes decline is automatic, they stop looking for causes. Once they stop looking for causes, they stop making changes. And once they stop making changes, the body obeys the life they have surrendered to. So here is what we are going to do. We are going to walk through 7 habits that quietly sabotage aging bodies and aging brains. We will move from the deceptively harmless to the genuinely life-altering. Some of these may irritate you. One of them will almost certainly surprise you. And the habit that sits at the very top of this list is something countless people do every single morning without a second thought, even though it may shape the entire biological tone of their day. Before we get there, we start with a ritual so ordinary that most people defend it instinctively: eating 3 large meals a day. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. Neat, traditional, familiar. It sounds balanced. It sounds disciplined. It sounds exactly like the routine many people were taught to trust. But after 65, the body is not processing those meals the way it once did, and pretending otherwise can create a slow chain reaction of bloating, fatigue, poor nutrient absorption, and muscle loss that feels mysterious until you understand what is really happening. As the body ages, digestion becomes less aggressive and less efficient. Stomach acid drops, enzyme production falls, the gut loses some of its ability to break down and absorb large loads of food. What once felt like a satisfying full meal can become a metabolic traffic jam. Food sits longer, protein is not used as effectively, blood sugar swings become more pronounced, energy crashes follow. And many older adults interpret that crash as proof they need to move less, when in reality, their eating pattern is part of what is draining them. Dr. Cole once worked with a 74-year-old woman named Eleanor, who was certain something was seriously wrong inside her body. Every evening, she ate one massive meal after a tiny breakfast and an inconsistent lunch. After dinner, she felt swollen, exhausted, and strangely heavy, as if her body shut down the moment the plate was empty. Tests found no dramatic hidden disease. Her schedule was the clue. Once her meals were redistributed into smaller, protein-rich portions spaced through the day, the bloating eased, her energy returned, and the exhaustion she thought belonged to old age began to disappear. This is where the science becomes deeply practical. Older muscle becomes resistant to the normal signals that tell it to rebuild after eating. That means seniors often need more high-quality protein, not less, and they need it delivered in amounts the body can actually use. Instead of flooding the system once or twice, smaller meals create repeated opportunities for repair. Add a little healthy fat and absorption improves further. Suddenly, food stops acting like a burden and starts acting like support. And if that first habit has already started to challenge what you thought was healthy, wait until you hear the next one, because the comfort ritual many people love most may be drying out the body, destabilizing blood pressure, and increasing the risk of a dangerous fall before the day has even begun. Most people never connect a private daily comfort with the public consequences that follow later. The dizziness in the hallway, the itching skin, the unexplained fatigue, the stumble that changes everything. But that connection is real, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The next habit hides inside steam, warmth, and routine, which is exactly why so many intelligent people keep repeating it for years while their bodies quietly pay the price. And what makes it so dangerous is that it feels soothing in the exact moment it may be weakening the systems older adults need most: skin protection, stable circulation, and confidence on their feet. Tomorrow. Warm water feels harmless, especially when the body is stiff, the morning is cold, and a shower seems like the gentlest possible way to begin the day. That is why almost nobody questions it. Yet one of the quietest ways older adults undermine their skin, circulation, and balance is by stepping into water that is too hot for too long and doing it every single day, as if comfort and safety are the same thing. When people are younger, the skin is more forgiving. Natural oils rebound quickly. The protective barrier holds moisture more effectively. Blood vessels respond rapidly to temperature changes, and the body can compensate without much drama. But after 65, that resilience changes. The skin thins, oil production falls, moisture escapes more easily. A long hot shower does not merely wash the body, it strips away protection that may already be in short supply. That is why some older adults spend all day dealing with itching, dryness, sensitivity, and cracking without realizing the problem begins before they even get dressed. They buy more lotions, stronger creams, expensive treatments, and still wonder why their skin feels tight and irritated. The answer is often painfully simple. The water is too hot, the exposure is too long, and the barrier their skin depends on is being dismantled every morning. But skin is only part of the danger. The real hidden threat is what hot water does to blood pressure. Heat causes blood vessels to widen. In a younger body, that shift is easier to manage. In an older body, especially one already dealing with slower vascular responses, medications, or mild dehydration, that sudden dilation can trigger lightheadedness, weakness, or a brief moment of instability at exactly the wrong time. A wet floor, a narrow tub, one dizzy turn of the head, and a private routine becomes a medical crisis. What makes this especially cruel is that many bathroom falls are later blamed on clumsiness or age, when in reality the body was set up to fail before the first towel was lifted. The shower itself created the conditions. The temperature changed circulation. The standing position challenged balance. The slick surface amplified risk. And because the event lasts only seconds, most people never identify the true chain reaction behind it. The solution is not misery, it is adjustment. Warm water is enough. Shorter showers are enough. A rich moisturizer applied while the skin is still slightly damp can preserve hydration far better than long soaking ever could. Even a brief finish with cooler water may help the vessels tighten again and leave the body feeling more alert rather than drained. That small change sounds insignificant until you realize how often routines repeated daily become biology written in slow motion. And if that seems surprising, the next habit is even more damaging because it disguises itself as caution. Thousands of older adults feel pain in their knees, hips, or back and conclude that rest is the responsible choice. They stop lifting. They stop training. They avoid resistance work because they believe protecting the joint means avoiding strain. It sounds wise. It feels logical. And in many cases, it is exactly the decision that accelerates the weakness making those joints suffer in the first place. Muscle and joint health are not separate stories. They are chapters of the same one. Weak muscles force joints to absorb loads they were never meant to handle alone. When the thighs cannot support the knees pay. When the glutes stop stabilizing the hips pay. When the back loses strength, posture collapses, and pain spreads through the spine like a warning nobody knows how to read. Rest may soothe symptoms briefly, but over time, inactivity steals the very support system the body depends on. This is the trap of sarcopenia, the age-related loss of muscle that can quietly erase independence long before a person recognizes its name. Without resistance work, strength fades faster each decade. Rising from a chair becomes harder. Climbing steps becomes uncertain. Balance declines. Reaction time slows. A stumble that might once have been corrected becomes a fall because the muscles needed for recovery are simply not there. Dr. Cole saw this in an 81-year-old man named Walter, who arrived convinced his body was shutting down. Knee pain had become the center of his life. He avoided long walks, skipped stairs when possible, and stopped doing nearly everything that required effort. The less he moved, the worse he felt. The worse he felt, the less he moved. It was a perfect downward spiral disguised as self-protection. Instead of prescribing surrender, Dr. Cole started him with chair-based resistance using light bands and slow, controlled repetitions. Nothing dramatic, no punishment, no heroic workout, just deliberate movement aimed at restoring support where the body had lost it. Within weeks, Walter noticed something he had not expected. The pain was not vanishing all at once, but he felt steadier. Getting up was easier. His legs no longer felt like they belonged to somebody much older. Months later, he was walking farther than he had in years. What changed was not only strength, it was trust. Once he felt his body answering effort instead of collapsing under it, fear loosened its grip. That is the transformation resistance training can create in older adults. It does not merely build muscle, it rebuilds permission. And there is a critical detail many people miss. After resistance work, older muscles are unusually ready to use incoming protein, but that window does not stay open forever. Feed the body well after training and repair is amplified. Ignore that timing and much of the opportunity is lost. Which means one of the smartest things a senior can do after a few bands, a few squats, or a few chair stands is not to rest first, but to nourish the rebuilding process before the body slips back into its older, less responsive rhythm. Then another weakness appears, and almost nobody sees it. By the time many people reach their late 60s or 70s, they have already accepted a quiet story about their eyes. Vision fades, glasses get stronger, print gets farther away, and there is nothing to do except adapt. They lean into brighter lamps, bigger fonts, and a resigned little laugh whenever menus become difficult to read. It sounds harmless, it sounds mature. But that resignation can become a second problem layered on top of the first. Because once people believe their visual system can only decline, they stop stimulating it, training it, and protecting the wider brain functions that depend on it. Most discussions about aging eyes focus only on lenses, prescriptions, or surgery. Much less attention is given to the muscles that help the eyes adjust focus and the brain networks that interpret what those eyes are seeing. Yet those systems matter enormously. The ability to shift from near to far, to detect contrast in dim conditions, to notice the edge of a step, or to separate a dark rug from a dark floor, is not just a matter of convenience. It is a matter of mobility, confidence, and survival. That is why the common habit of relying entirely on reading glasses while doing nothing else may quietly accelerate dependence. Glasses can be helpful, necessary, and absolutely appropriate. The danger begins when they become the whole strategy. If the eyes never practice changing focus, if the brain never gets challenged with visual variation, and if nutrition and lighting are ignored, then the visual system can drift into further decline, while the person assumes the prescription itself is the only story that matters. Simple training can make a difference. Slowly shifting focus from a nearby object to a distant one, repeating controlled visual exercises, improving home lighting, and supporting the body with nutrients associated with eye health may not create miraculous reversal, but they can preserve function longer than most people expect. That matters because visual decline is not isolated. Reduced contrast sensitivity and slower visual processing contribute directly to stumbles, hesitation, and the strange loss of confidence that can make a once active person begin avoiding evening walks, crowded rooms, or unfamiliar spaces. Dr. Cole once noticed that several of his patients were not only struggling to read, they were moving differently. They reached for rails sooner. They paused at curbs. They seemed subtly unsure in places that should have felt ordinary. When he asked about falls, near misses, and low light conditions, the pattern sharpened. Many were blaming their bodies when their eyes and brain were silently failing to provide the information movement required. So yes, wear the glasses you need, but do not let them become an excuse to stop engaging the system beneath them. The older body often declines fastest in the places people stop challenging. And once visual hesitation appears, it can spread into something larger: reduced activity, reduced confidence, reduced independence, and a growing fear that life is becoming smaller for reasons no one fully understands. That shrinking effect leads us into another habit people almost always misunderstand, because it seems to belong on the side of health. Sleep is healing. Rest is essential. Everyone knows that. Which is why so few seniors suspect that spending too long in bed or leaning on certain sleep aids may be sabotaging the very brain function they are trying to protect. At first glance, oversleeping sounds like a luxury problem. If someone is getting 9 or 10 hours, the assumption is that they must be restoring themselves. But long time in bed does not always mean deep restoration. In many older adults, it can signal fragmented sleep, low-quality sleep, medication effects, depression, poor circadian rhythm, or a brain that is failing to cycle through the most important stages efficiently. The result is especially deceptive because the person often wakes feeling tired and concludes the answer must be even more sleep. That is where the trap closes. The brain has a nightly housekeeping system that works best during deep, consolidated sleep. It is during those more restorative phases that waste products are cleared and neural recovery is supported. When the night becomes broken, shallow, and stretched, time in bed increases while true repair may not. Someone can spend 10 hours sleeping badly and still wake more clouded than a person who slept 7 strong hours with proper rhythm. Dr. Cole saw this repeatedly in patients who insisted they were resting plenty, while their memory, mood, and mental sharpness continued to slip. Some had fallen into afternoon naps that spilled too late into the day. Some stayed in bed long after waking because they assumed more minutes meant more healing. Others had slowly become dependent on store-bought sleep aids that seemed harmless precisely because they were easy to buy. That false sense of safety is what makes the next reveal so important. Many over-the-counter sleep products do not simply make people drowsy. In older adults, they can interfere with chemistry tied to memory, attention, and cognition. And the people using them night after night often have no idea they may be trading short-term sedation for long-term fog. One woman in her late 70s, June, came in convinced she was simply becoming forgetful. She was sleeping long hours and still felt as if a thick curtain remained over her mind until midday. Her routine looked restful from the outside. On paper, it appeared almost admirable. But hidden inside that routine was a chemical shortcut she had trusted for years. And once that shortcut was exposed, an entirely different explanation for her decline began to emerge. What happened when that pattern was changed did not just improve her nights, it challenged one of the deepest assumptions older adults make about sleep itself, and the consequences of getting that assumption wrong reach far beyond tired mornings. And the more invisible that damage remains, the easier it is for millions of older adults to mistake a reversible pattern for a permanent sentence forever. When June finally described her nights in detail, the pattern became impossible to ignore. She was going to bed early, lying there for long stretches, waking several times, and then taking a familiar over-the-counter sleep aid that left her drowsy enough to drift off again. On the surface, she looked like someone committed to rest. In reality, her brain was spending night after night under the influence of a medication that can blunt alertness, disrupt clean cognition, and leave older adults with a morning haze so persistent they mistake it for aging itself. The cruelest part of that cycle is how convincing it feels. A pill seems to help. More time in bed seems sensible. Fatigue during the day seems to confirm the need for both. But the chemistry underneath tells a different story. Certain common sleep aids can interfere with neurotransmitters closely tied to memory and learning. In older adults, whose brains may already be working harder to preserve clarity, that interference is not trivial. It can create confusion, slower thinking, and a dragging mental heaviness that quietly reshapes daily life. Once June began tapering away from the medication under supervision, tightening her sleep window, and building a calmer evening rhythm, the change was not instant, but it was unmistakable. Her mornings became clearer. Her mind started arriving earlier. The fog that had seemed permanent began to thin. What she needed was not more sedation. She needed better quality, better timing, and a body that could trust its own rhythm again. That distinction matters for every older adult. Healthy sleep is not measured only by hours. It is measured by depth, continuity, timing, and what kind of person rises from the bed the next morning. If long sleep leaves the brain dull, the body heavy, and the day slow to begin, then the routine deserves scrutiny, not praise. A cool room, consistent sleep and wake times, less late screen exposure, and calming non-drug routines may sound less dramatic than a pill, but they work with the brain instead of against it. And that leads to a danger even easier to miss because it often arrives without any sensation at all. Many seniors drink less water not because they are careless, but because the internal signal that once shouted now barely whispers. They are not waiting too long on purpose. They simply do not feel thirsty in the same way anymore. That subtle shift can have enormous consequences. By the time many people notice dehydration, the process is already affecting concentration, mood, energy, digestion, and medication balance. In older adults, the thirst mechanism becomes less reliable. Someone can be mildly dehydrated and feel almost normal. There may be no dramatic warning, just a little more fatigue, a little more constipation, a little more confusion, a little more instability. Because the signs are scattered and unspectacular, dehydration often slips beneath attention while doing real damage. This is one reason sudden confusion in older adults can be so frightening. Families assume the worst. They fear stroke, dementia, or a severe medical event, and sometimes those fears are justified. But in many cases, the body is reacting to a simpler, quieter problem that has been building for days. Too little fluid thickens the margin for error. Urinary tract infections become more likely. Kidneys strain. Medications concentrate. The brain loses efficiency. Everything becomes less forgiving. What makes this especially dangerous is that many older adults intentionally limit fluids because they dislike getting up at night, worry about urgency, or feel annoyed by frequent trips to the bathroom. The strategy makes emotional sense. Unfortunately, the body often answers by becoming even more vulnerable during the day. Energy drops, bowels slow, dizziness increases, and because the person is already drinking less, they may blame themselves for feeling old, rather than recognizing the body is working with inadequate support. Hydration does not have to become obsessive to become effective. The real key is consistency. Regular, small amounts throughout the day outperform one large rescue effort later. A visible bottle helps. Hydrating foods help. A little electrolyte support can help some people absorb and retain fluid more effectively. The goal is not to chase perfection. It is to stop treating thirst as the only permission to drink. Dr. Cole once asked a group of older patients to describe how they decided when to drink water. Most said the same thing: when I remember, or when I feel thirsty. That answer sounds harmless until you understand that both memory and thirst are unreliable guides in the very population most at risk. Waiting for the body to complain is like waiting for a dimming engine light before checking the oil. By the time the signal becomes obvious, wear is already underway. And then there is the mind. Even mild dehydration can affect short-term memory, reaction time, and attention. A person may feel slightly off, slightly slower, slightly less themselves, and never suspect water is part of the story. They may become more irritable, more tired, less steady, and still think the day is simply not going well. But if something as simple as fluid balance can influence brain performance that much, then the daily habits wrapped around it deserve far more respect than most people give them. Because the moment hydration improves, another question rises almost immediately. If something so basic can sharpen the brain and steady the body, what happens when a person changes the habit that may control the entire direction of the morning? The one routine hiding in plain sight that shapes inflammation, energy, mood, and movement before breakfast is even finished. That is why the final habit shocks people so deeply. It does not involve a pill, a surgery, or an expensive program. It involves the first decision made after opening the eyes. Sit too soon, and the body stays trapped between sleep and action. Move at the right moment, and systems connected to energy, blood sugar, stiffness, and mood begin telling a completely different story. The most widespread habit on this list does not look dangerous. It looks peaceful. It looks earned. It looks like exactly what a person should do after waking up. Sit down. Pour the coffee, turn on the news, settle into the chair, and let the day begin slowly. For millions of older adults, this ritual feels harmless, almost sacred. But what if those first quiet minutes are not neutral at all? What if they are the very window in which the body is deciding whether to move toward alertness, mobility, and resilience, or toward stiffness, sluggishness, and decline? That is the hidden significance of the first half hour after waking. The body does not rise randomly, it launches. Hormones shift rapidly. Cortisol climbs in a carefully timed surge designed to raise blood pressure, sharpen attention, mobilize energy, and prepare muscles and circulation for action. In a healthy rhythm, this awakening response is not the enemy. It is one of the body's most powerful natural tools, but it expects partnership. It expects movement. It expects light. It expects the person who has just woken up to signal back that the day has truly begun. When an older adult sits immediately and stays still, that conversation is interrupted. The body sends out its wake-up chemistry, but the muscles do not answer. The circulation prepares for demand, but demand never comes. Stiffness lingers. Alertness drags. Joints remain reluctant. What looks like rest can become a biological misfire, repeated morning after morning, until sluggishness begins to feel like identity. This matters more in older age because mornings are often when weakness speaks the loudest. Many seniors describe the same sequence. They wake stiff, they move cautiously, their backs ache, their knees protest, their hands feel slow, and their mind seems to arrive later than the rest of the body. So they sit, believing the chair will solve the problem. But in many cases, the chair extends it. Stillness allows the body to stay half asleep while the day quietly slips into lower energy and lower output. The opposite approach sounds almost too simple to matter. Stand up, move gently, walk a little, stretch, step outside if possible. Let daylight strike the eyes. Let the legs remember their job before the recliner has a chance to redefine the morning. 10 minutes can be enough to change the trajectory. Not because it burns extraordinary calories or proves exceptional discipline, but because it aligns the body with the biological event already happening inside it. Morning light amplifies that effect. The eyes relay brightness to the brain's timing center, helping anchor circadian rhythm, elevate daytime alertness, and support healthier melatonin release later that night. In other words, early movement does not only improve the morning, it can improve the evening too. One small action begins influencing sleep, mood, appetite, metabolism, and inflammation in ways that feel disproportionate until you realize the body is built around rhythm, not isolated moments. Dr. Cole saw this vividly in a 77-year-old man named Thomas. Retirement had quietly dissolved his structure. He woke, made coffee, sank into his favorite chair, and stayed there with the television for nearly an hour every morning. By noon, he still felt foggy. His joints ached for the first part of every day. His energy never truly lifted. Tests later showed rising blood sugar, inflammatory strain, and a body drifting in the wrong direction. Instead of starting with a complicated overhaul, Dr. Cole asked for one change only. For 21 days, Thomas had to walk outside for 10 minutes within 15 minutes of waking. Before the chair, before the headlines, before the comfort ritual could claim the morning. He did not need speed. He did not need athletic effort. He needed consistency and daylight. The first week felt awkward. Thomas said the walk seemed almost annoyingly small, too simple to justify the effort of changing his routine. But by the second week, the stiffness that used to dominate his mornings began loosening sooner. By the third, he noticed he no longer needed half the day to feel mentally present. His energy rose earlier, his mood steadied. Even his fasting glucose started moving in a better direction. Then came the sentence Dr. Cole never forgot. Thomas said, "I feel like somebody turned the lights back on inside me." That is what many older adults are actually searching for. Not immortality, not perfection, just the return of internal brightness. The sense that the body is cooperating instead of resisting, that the mind is reachable, that the day can begin with momentum instead of recovery. And this is why the morning chair can be far more consequential than it appears. It is not furniture, it is a signal. Used too early and too often, it teaches the body to start retreating before the day has even opened. Replaced briefly with movement, it can become something else entirely, a reward after activation rather than a substitute for it. By now, the pattern across all 7 habits should feel unmistakable. Decline is often not one dramatic event. It is a collection of ordinary routines whose consequences become visible only years later. Eat in ways the older body can use. Shower in ways the skin and circulation can tolerate. Strengthen the muscles that protect the joints. Train the visual system instead of surrendering it. Protect sleep quality instead of worshiping sleep quantity. Hydrate before thirst becomes your only guide. And above all, do not hand the morning away before your body has had the chance to wake itself properly. But the most important part is still ahead, because knowing the habits is one thing. Understanding what they mean for the rest of a person's life is something much deeper. And once people understand that truth, the real challenge is no longer seeing the danger. It is deciding whether tomorrow morning will look exactly like today, or whether one ordinary choice will become the first visible line in a completely different future from now ahead. Information changes nothing by itself. That is the uncomfortable truth at the center of every health transformation. People can hear the right advice, nod at the right studies, even feel moved by the right story, and still drift back into the routines that are quietly undoing them. Change begins only when information becomes interpretation, and interpretation becomes action. That is why these 7 habits matter so much. They are not abstract concepts. They are daily votes cast either for independence or for decline. Think about what is really at stake. This is not just about smoother digestion or a little more energy. It is about whether a person in their 70s can trust their legs on the stairs. It is about whether an 80-year-old can wake up and think clearly enough to enjoy a conversation without fearing the next forgotten word. It is about whether the body remains a place of participation or slowly becomes a seat from which life is watched from farther and farther away. Dr. Cole had seen both futures unfold. He had watched older adults accept shrinking lives because they thought the process was inevitable, and he had watched others reverse trajectories that once looked fixed, not through miracle cures, not through impossible discipline, through repeated, intelligent adjustments that respected how the aging body actually works. The most dramatic transformations rarely began with intensity. They began with clarity. Clarity sounds modest, but it can be revolutionary. Once a person understands that 3 oversized meals may be exhausting their digestive system instead of nourishing it, they stop blaming age for every crash after dinner. Once they see that hot showers may be stripping skin and destabilizing circulation, they stop treating discomfort and dizziness as random. Once they understand that weak muscles punish joints more than thoughtful resistance ever could, fear starts losing its authority. Knowledge does not just provide options, it restores agency. That agency deepens when people realize how many symptoms they have normalized unnecessarily. The slow brain after a chemically sedated night, the stubborn constipation fueled by chronic underhydration, the hesitant gait made worse by neglected vision, the heavy morning fog reinforced by immediate sitting and delayed movement. These are not always fixed by one change, and they are not always reversible in full, but they are often far more responsive than people are ever told. This is why older adults deserve better than vague encouragement. They deserve specifics. Eat more strategically, protect protein, respect the skin barrier, build strength even if you must begin in a chair. Challenge the eyes gently but consistently. Defend sleep quality with rhythm instead of dependency. Drink before thirst becomes the only alarm. Move before the day has the chance to harden around stiffness. These are not trendy tricks. They are direct responses to the way aging physiology actually behaves. And perhaps the most powerful idea of all is this: decline often feels sudden only when the daily patterns behind it remain invisible. A fall may happen in a second, but the weakness beneath it built for years. Brain fog may feel mysterious, but the sleep, hydration, and sedentary mornings behind it may have been rehearsing that fog for a long time. Loss of independence can seem to arrive out of nowhere, yet it is frequently the final chapter of tiny, overlooked habits that were patiently writing the story all along. The good news is that small habits can write a different story too. A 10-minute walk after waking, a protein-rich meal at the right time, a shorter shower, a glass of water finished before thirst appears, a few minutes of resistance work that tell the body it is still expected to stay strong. These actions may look too ordinary to matter, which is exactly why people underestimate them. But biology is built from repeated signals, not dramatic speeches. Imagine two futures beginning from the same kitchen tomorrow morning. In one, nothing changes. The person wakes, sits immediately, eats the same way, moves cautiously, drinks too little, sleeps too long but not deeply, and keeps assuming the body is simply following age.